That morning, no one expected a single act of defiance to change military history. What began as routine training became a moment every soldier on base would remember, and one that would test the difference between following orders and doing what's right. The fog clung to the docks of Portsmouth harbour like a reluctant recruit, muting the sharp calls of gulls and the distant rumble of ferries crossing the Solent. At HMS Excellent, the Royal Navy's gunnery school on Whale Island, the air carried the salt tang of the sea mixed with the faint metallic scent of oiled rifles. It was 06:30 hours, and the cadets of the latest intake were already forming up on the parade ground, their boots scraping against the damp concrete in precise unison. The island, a fortified speck in the harbour, had stood as a bastion of naval discipline since the 19th century, its red brick barracks and drill halls echoing with the cadence of commands that had shaped generations of officers. Lieutenant Commander Elias Thorne stood at the head of the formation, his posture ramrod straight under the weight of his peaked cap. At 42, Thorne had risen through the ranks on a foundation of unyielding adherence to protocol, his service ribbons glinting faintly in the grey light. He scanned the lines of young faces, 80 cadets, mostly fresh from university or the reserves, their uniforms crisp, but their eyes betraying the nerves of the untested. This was Indoctrination Week, the crucible where civilians were forged into naval warriors. Thorne's voice cut through the mist like a bosun's whistle. "Fall in. By the right. Quick march." The cadets moved as one, their footsteps a rhythmic thunder that drowned out the lap of waves against the sea wall. Among them was Cadet Marcus Hale, a broad-shouldered 22-year-old from Manchester, whose bravado masked a deeper insecurity about proving himself among the elite. Hale had joined the intake with dreams of command, but the rigid hierarchy chafed against his street-smart edges. Flanking him were his mates, Cadets Riley and Voss, both cut from similar cloth, eager, competitive, and prone to the locker-room banter that passed for camaraderie in the lower ranks. Further back in the formation, detached from the main body, stood Sergeant Kira Voss, no relation to the cadet, though the name had already sparked whispers. At 35, she was a transfer from the Special Air Service, her posting to Whale Island, a temporary assignment to oversee advanced combat simulations for the officer cadets. Kira's record was classified beyond clearance levels most here could dream of. Deployments in Helmand, counter-terror ops in the Gulf, and a reputation for precision under fire that had earned her the quiet respect of her SAS squadron. She wore the standard-issue battle dress, but her sleeves were rolled with the efficiency of someone who had slept in far worse than a barracks cot. Her dark hair was pulled into a tight bun, and her eyes, sharp, assessing, missed nothing. Kira had no K9 partner on this rotation. Her unit was herself, honed by years of solo insertions and team leads where loyalty was measured in actions, not words. The morning's drill was standard, a perimeter security exercise simulating a harbour breach. Thorne's orders were clear. Cadets would pair off. Patrol the outer paths and report any anomalies. Eyes sharp, voices low, he barked. This is not a stroll by the Thames. One lapse and the whole unit pays. The group dispersed into the fog-shrouded paths that wound around the island's fortifications, the crunch of gravel underfoot punctuating the low hum of a patrol boat idling offshore. Hale, Riley, and Voss, the cadets, not the sergeant, stuck together, veering off course toward the auxiliary dock where new arrivals sometimes berthed. They were supposed to be checking the chain-link perimeter, but Hale's attention snagged on a figure emerging from the mist, a woman in civilian fatigues, duffel bag slung over one shoulder, striding purposefully toward the main gate. She looked young, out of place, perhaps a new administrative recruit or one of the support staff bussed in from the mainland. Her posture was confident, but in the dim light, she could pass for just another fresh face. "Oi, lost bitch," Hale called out, his voice laced with the rough jest that passed for morale among the lads. Riley snickered and Voss elbowed him, but they closed in, forming a loose semicircle. It was meant as a hazing ritual, the kind whispered about in the mess hall. Nothing malicious, just the cadets asserting their fragile authority over an outsider. "This ain't the tourist spot, love. Turn around before you get yourself lost proper." The woman stopped, her duffel hitting the ground with a soft thud. She turned slowly, and in that moment, The fog seemed to part just enough for her features to sharpen. Kira Voss, Sergeant Voss, tilted her head, her expression neutral, but her stance shifted imperceptibly. Weight balanced on the balls of her feet, hands loose at her sides. She wasn't lost. She'd been assigned quarters in the officers' block and was cutting through the perimeter to avoid the main road. But these cadets didn't know that. To them, she was just another target for their initiation games. "State your business," Hale pressed, stepping closer. His chest puffed in mock command. The others hung back, grins fading as they sensed the shift in the air. Kira's eyes locked on Hale's, not with anger, but with the cold evaluation of someone who had stared down insurgents in pitch-black compounds. "Cadet," she said evenly, her voice carrying the clipped precision of SAS briefings, "you're out of position. Perimeter patrol ends at the jetty. Report back to your LT before you compound the error." Hale blinked, caught off guard. The tone wasn't deferential, it was instructional, like a superior correcting a subordinate. Riley muttered something under his breath, but Kira ignored it, her focus unwavering. She could see the chain of command fraying here. These boys, barely out of their teens, testing boundaries they didn't understand. In her world, such lapses could mean lives lost, not just reprimands. But Thorne's drill emphasized discipline, not confrontation. She was here to observe, not intervene in cadet squabbles. Voss, the cadet, nudged Hale. "She's probably one of the new girls from admin." "Easy, mate." But Hale, ego-pricked, doubled down. "Admin? You look like you wandered off a civvy ship. Hand over that bag. We'll escort you proper." It was a bluff, a power play, but in the rigid world of Whale Island, even small violations of protocol could escalate. Kira's hand twitched toward her ID pouch, but she held back. Defiance here wasn't about fists. It was about restoring order without shattering the chain. Yet as the cadets advanced, their laughter echoing off the damp walls, she felt the familiar tension coil in her gut, the moral pull between letting them learn the hard way and stepping in to prevent a reckoning that could derail the entire intake. Thorne's whistle pierced the fog from afar, calling the unit back. The cadets hesitated, then retreated with awkward salutes, muttering as they jogged off. Kira watched them go, picking up her duffel. The incident was minor, a ripple in the daily grind. But in the quiet that followed, with the sea wind whispering through the chain links, she knew routines like this one hid deeper fractures, ones that demanded more than obedience to mend. By the time she reached the barracks, the sun was breaking through, casting long shadows over the parade ground. Thorne nodded to her as she passed, oblivious to the near miss. "Sergeant Voss, drills go smooth?" "As expected, sir," she replied, her voice steady. But inside, the test had already begun, not just for the cadets, but for the institution itself. The afternoon sun slanted across the drill hall at HMS Excellent, turning the polished oak floors into a mirror of brass and discipline. Cadet Marcus Hale wiped sweat from his brow, his uniform shirt clinging to his back as he reassembled his SA-80 rifle for the third time that session. The armory's air was thick with the scent of gun oil and cordite residue, a familiar tang that grounded him amid the morning's unease. Instructor Petty Officer Langford paced the line of cadets, his voice a steady metronome. "Chamber empty, bolt forward, safety on. Any deviation, and you're scrubbing the range till lights out." Hale's hands moved methodically, but his mind replayed the encounter at the dock. The woman, Sergeant Voss, he'd pieced together from overheard chatter, hadn't flinched, hadn't backed down. It gnawed at him, that quiet authority in her gaze, like she'd sized him up and found him wanting. Riley, 2 stations down, shot him a sidelong glance, mouthing, "Lost bitch," with a smirk that didn't reach his eyes. Voss, the cadet, chuckled softly, but there was tension in it, the kind that built when pranks edged too close to real lines. Across the hall, in the observation booth, Sergeant Kira Voss leaned against the railing, her arms crossed as she watched the cadets cycle through the drill. Her assignment here was clear: integrate SAS tactics into the officer training pipeline, focusing on close quarters response and threat assessment. No fanfare, no lectures, just results. Thorne had briefed her that morning over tea in the wardroom, his tone all business. "These lads are the future skippers. Show them precision without the theatrics." Kira had nodded, but the dock incident lingered, a subtle fracture in the unit's cohesion. In her SAS days, unchecked bravado like Hale's could unravel a patrol. Here, it was a cadet's right, but one that tested the boundaries of respect. The drill shifted to paired maneuvers, cadets simulating a breach response, one covering while the other advanced. Hale drew Riley as his partner, their movements crisp but off-sync. Hale hesitating on the entry call, Riley overcompensating with a shout. Langford halted them mid-sequence. "Hale, that's not a pub brawl. Voice low, intent clear. Again." The correction stung and Hale's jaw tightened, his earlier bravado curdling into resentment. As they reset, Riley leaned in. "Bet that bird from the dock threw you off. Thought she was easy pickings." Hale forced a grin. "Nah, just testing the waters. Next time, we'll see who's lost." Kira's ear caught the murmur, her position giving her advantage over the hall's echoes. She didn't intervene. Observation was her role, not policing. But the words echoed the morning's jest, amplifying it in the confined space. In the SAS, loyalty was forged in silence, trust earned through shared risks, not words. Here, the cadets' banter masked insecurities, but it eroded the chain, juniors mocking outsiders, seniors turning blind eyes. She adjusted her stance, the wooden railing cool under her palms, and noted Hale's form, solid build, quick reflexes, but eyes darting too often, seeking approval. By 1400 hours, the session broke for Chow, the cadets filing out in orderly rows toward the mess deck. The island's paths wound past weathered gun emplacements, relics of naval history now overgrown with salt grass. Hale lagged behind, Voss and Riley pulling ahead with talk of the evening's liberty run into Portsmouth proper. "Pub on the high street," Riley said. "Real ale. No officers." But Hale's step slowed as he spotted Kira ahead, veering toward the simulation block for her own prep. Impulse overrode caution. He jogged to catch up, the gravel crunching under his boots like a warning. "Sergeant!" he called, voice pitched just above the wind. Kira turned, her expression neutral. Duffel swapped for a clipboard of scenario maps. "Cadet Hale, something on your mind?" Up close in the daylight, her presence was sharper, no mist to soften the lines of experience etched around her eyes. Hale straightened, saluting awkwardly. "Just about earlier. The dock. Didn't mean to overstep. New intake jitters, you know?" It was half apology, half probe, his mates watching from afar with raised brows. Kira held his gaze, assessing. In her world, apologies were rare. Actions spoke. But this was training ground, not theatre of war. Room for growth if seized. "Jitters explain. They don't excuse," she replied evenly. "Perimeter's no place for games. Focus on the drill, cadet. That's where you'll prove yourself." Hale nodded, but as he turned away, Riley's voice carried from the path. "Told you. Mate lost bitch thinks she's in charge." The words landed like a misfired round, loud enough for Kira to hear, Hale freezing mid-step. The air thickened, the distant hum of a Sea King helicopter underscoring the moment. Cadet Voss shifted uncomfortably, sensing the line crossed. Kira's hand tightened on the clipboard, but she didn't rise to it. Defiance here meant modeling restraint, showing these cadets that true authority came from composure, not retorts. Yet the moral pull tugged. Ignore it, and the fracture widened. Call it out, and it became her burden, not theirs. Thorne's emphasis on unit harmony rang in her mind. Escalation could flag the intake, ripple through evaluations. Hale spun back, face flushing. "Riley, shut it. She's SAS, all right?" Transferred in. The revelation hung, sourced from a quick glance at the duty roster. Riley's smirk faltered, Voss's eyes widening. The group fell silent, the weight of hierarchy settling like harbour fog. Kira didn't confirm. Let them learn through channels. "Carry on, cadets," she said, voice steady as she continued to the block. But inside, the test deepened, not just Hale's bravado, but the institution's tolerance for it. One unchecked jest could seed doubt, undermine the loyalty that bound ranks. In the mess deck that evening, the clatter of trays and low murmur of conversation filled the space, stew and bread the standard fare. Thorne joined the officers' table, Kira across from him. "Cadets settling?" he asked, Falk pausing. "They're green, sir, but green bends before it breaks." Her words were measured, the darkened hall incidents unspoken. Thorne nodded, oblivious. "Good. We need that steel for what's coming. Joint ops with the Army next month." Kira ate in silence, the salt on her lips a reminder of the sea's unforgiving edge. Outside, the sun dipped low, painting the Solent gold, but shadows lengthened on Whale Island, hinting at reckonings yet to unfold. Hale at his table pushed peas around his plate. Riley's apology mumbled over tea. "Didn't know, mate. Thought she was support." The camaraderie felt forced now. The morning's lark soured. In the quiet hours before taps, Hale lay on his bunk, the barracks creaks like distant commands. The defiance he'd sparked wasn't his alone. It tested them all, pulling at the threads of duty and respect in ways no drill could prepare for. And as the island settled into night, Kira reviewed her maps by lamplight, the moral tension coiling tighter, obedience to protocol or the conscience that demanded more. The next morning dawned crisp over Whale Island, the Solent's choppy waters reflecting a pale sky streaked with cirrus clouds. At 0500 hours, the Reveille bugle pierced the barracks like a knife through canvas, pulling the cadets from their bunks in a symphony of groans and rustling kit. Sergeant Kira Voss was already up, her routine etched from years in forward operating bases, where sleep was a luxury rationed by threat levels. She laced her boots methodically in the dim light of the officers' quarters, the leather creaking softly under her fingers. No fanfare for her transfer. She was here to embed SAS precision into the Naval Cadets training, a bridge between elite forces and the broader service. But the cadets' whispers from the dock and mess deck had reached her ears through the thin walls, idle talk of the lost one, laced with uneasy laughter. It wasn't rage she felt. It was the quiet calculation of a soldier weighing when words became weapons. In the parade square, Lieutenant Commander Thorne assembled the intake for the day's evolution, a combined arms simulation, integrating naval gunnery with ground assault tactics. The air hummed with the low thrum of generators powering mock targets along the shoreline, and the scent of diesel mingled with the brine off the harbour. "Form ranks!" Thorne's command echoed off the red brick facades, his gloved hand snapping a salute to the ensign fluttering atop the flagpole. The cadets snapped to attention. Hale in the front row, his posture rigid, but his eyes flicking toward the periphery where Kira stood with the instructors. Riley and Voss flanked him, their faces set in forced neutrality, the previous evening's tension hanging like unspent powder. Kira's role today was to lead a segment on threat identification, spotting anomalies in a simulated urban breach, drawing from her SAS ops in tight alleys where hesitation cost lives. She stepped forward as Thorne nodded her in, her voice carrying clear and unadorned over the formation. "Cadets, in close quarters, the enemy doesn't announce. You read posture, intent, environment. Pair off and run the scenario. One advances, one assesses. Report deviations immediately." Her words were procedural, stripped of embellishment, but they landed with the weight of experience. The cadets broke into teams, the gravel paths crunching under their boots as they moved to the simulation barriers, stacked crates mimicking harbour warehouses, painted with faded naval insignia. Hale drew Cadet Voss as his partner, Riley rotating to another group under Langford's eye. The pairing felt deliberate, Thorne's way of mixing dynamics after yesterday's murmurs in the duty log. Hale gripped his training rifle, the polymer cool against his palm, and took point on the approach. "Clear left!" he called low, sweeping the corner with practiced sweeps. But his focus splintered. Across the barrier, Kira demonstrated a fluid entry to another team, her movements economical. No wasted energy, just lethal efficiency. Voss noticed Hale's hesitation. "Eyes front, mate, she's not the target." Hale grunted, pushing forward, but the seed of doubt from the dock festered, twisting into a need to reclaim ground. The drill escalated when a breach alarm sounded, a recorded klaxon blaring from speakers hidden in the dunes. Cadets were to secure the perimeter and extract a mock VIP, but chaos injected realism. Smoke grenades popped, filling the air with acrid haze that stung the eyes and coated throats. Hale and Voss navigated the fog, their breath steady but quickened. Then, from the murk, Riley's voice cut through, off script, unbidden. "Incoming. Lost Btch at 3 o'clock. Secure her position." It was meant as a jest, tagging Kira in the simulation as she circled to observe from the flank. But the words boomed over the radio net, open channel mistake or not, carrying to every team and instructor within earshot. Kira froze mid-stride, the smoke parting just enough to reveal her silhouette. The cadets nearby halted, rifles dipping as confusion rippled through the ranks. Hale's face drained of color. He keyed his radio. "Negative, that's Sergeant Voss. Stand down!" But the damage echoed, the klaxon fading into an awkward silence, broken only by the lap of waves against the revetments. Thorne's whistle shrilled, halting the evolution cold. He strode forward, his boots thudding on the damp ground, eyes narrowing under the brim of his cap. "What in blazes was that, Cadet Riley?" "This is a simulation, not a sideshow." Riley stood at attention, sweat beading on his forehead despite the chill, his rifle slung too loosely. "Sir, just calling the play. Thought it was part of the scenario." The excuse hung limp, witnessed by the full intake. 80 pairs of eyes fixed on the unfolding breach of decorum. Kira remained still, her expression impassive, but her mind raced through protocols, reported up the chain or let the moment teach. In the SAS, such lapses were addressed in debriefs, not spectacles, but here, under naval eyes, visibility amplified every fault. Thorne turned to her, voice level. "Sergeant Voss, your assessment?" She met his gaze, the smoke still curling around her ankles like hesitant recruits. "Discipline holds the line." "Sir, words like that erode it faster than any breach." It was measured, not accusatory, focusing on the unit, not the individual. But the cadets shifted, murmurs suppressed under Thorne's glare. Hale stepped forward, unbidden, saluting sharply. "My fault, sir. I briefed the team poorly after yesterday." Riley meant no disrespect. It was a shield for his mate, loyalty pulling him into the fray, but it dragged the dock incident into the light, witnesses now multiplying. Thorne's jaw tightened, the weight of command settling. "This isn't Manchester banter, Cadet Hale. It's HMS Excellent. Report to my office post-drill, all 3 of you." The order rippled outward, the simulation abandoned as instructors herded the cadets back to formation. Kira watched Riley's shoulders slump, the bravado stripped away, revealing the boy beneath the uniform. Moral tension coiled in her chest. Intervene as outsider, or trust the chain to self-correct? She'd seen units fracture over less, egos unchecked, leading to real-world failures. Yet Thorne's response hinted at institutional gears turning, an inquiry, perhaps a formal note in the logs, testing the balance between correction and cohesion. As the formation dismissed for a water break, the sun climbed higher, burning off the haze and casting harsh shadows across the square. Hale caught Kira's eye briefly, a nod of apology in his stance. No words, just the silent acknowledgement of a line crossed. Riley avoided gazes, Voss clapping his shoulder in quiet support. In the wardroom later, over lukewarm tea, Thorne confided to Kira, "Green lads, but they'll learn. Your presence is stirring the pot. Good. Keeps them sharp." She nodded, but the reckoning felt nascent, the public call-out a spark that could ignite reform or resentment. Outside, gulls wheeled over the harbour, their cries a stark counterpoint to the disciplined hush settling over the island. By evening, as the cadets scrubbed gear in the armoury under Langford's watchful eye, the incident permeated the air like gun oil residue, unseen but pervasive. Hale worked in silence, the scrub brush rasping against metal, his thoughts on the cost of unchecked jests. Kira, reviewing footage in the sim block, noted the timestamps, one offhand phrase captured for the record. The test wasn't over. It was evolving, pulling duty and conscience into sharper relief, with the institution's response the true measure of strength. Comment where you're watching from. I want to know how far stories of courage and integrity can reach. The wardroom at HMS Excellent hummed with the subdued rhythm of evening routines, the clink of porcelain cups against saucers, punctuating the low murmur of officers reviewing the day's logs. Steam rose from a fresh pot of tea, carrying the earthy scent that mingled with the faint brine drifting in from the open porthole. Lieutenant Commander Thorne sat at the head of the scarred oak table, his fingers drumming a measured tattoo on the leather-bound duty roster. While Sergeant Kira Voss occupied the chair opposite, her posture relaxed yet alert, as if scanning for unseen threats even in this sanctuary of hierarchy. The incident on the parade square lingered in the air like the acrid aftertaste of the smoke grenades, unspoken but palpable, a fracture in the seamless drill of naval life. Thorne cleared his throat, his voice gravelly from years of barked commands. "Sergeant, your input on the cadets, Hale, Riley, Voss, they're solid on basics, but that radio blunder, it's not just green, it's a symptom." He slid the roster toward her, the pages whispering against the wood. Kira scanned the entries, her eyes tracing the neat script, notes on marksmanship scores, patrol timings, and now, L-flagged entry for unauthorized transmission during SIMI. In her SAS rotations, such lapses were dissected in after-action reviews, not debated over tea, but here, on Whale Island, the chain of command demanded transparency to preserve the unit's steel spine. "Symptoms of what, sir?" Kira replied evenly, setting the roster down. Her words were precise, honed by briefings where every syllable carried weight. Thorne leaned back, the chair creaking under his frame. "Intake's tight-knit, but they're testing edges. That dock business yesterday, Hale mentioned it in his statement. Banter turning sour, your transfer's a wild card. Stirs the pot." He wasn't accusing, it was assessment, the institutional lens weighing her role as catalyst. Kira nodded, the porthole's draft tugging at the edge of her collar. She'd chosen restraint on the square, letting Thorne's authority take the lead, but the moral coil tightened. Obey the observer's silence, or voice the erosion she saw in those cadets' eyes. Outside, the Solent's waters lapped steadily against the island's revetments, a counterpoint to the mounting tension. The three cadets waited in the antechamber, their boots polished to a gleam but their faces etched with the uncertainty of the uninitiated. Hale stood at parade rest, his broad shoulders squared, but his fingers flexed subtly at his sides, a tell of inner churn. Riley paced a tight circuit, the floorboards groaning under his steps, while Cadet Voss leaned against the bulkhead, arms crossed, his usual easy demeanor cracked by the weight of solidarity. The door to the wardroom swung open, and Thorne's aides summoned them in, the hinges squeaking like a warning. "Attention!" Thorne's command snapped the air taut as the cadets filed in, saluting in unison. Kira remained seated, her presence a quiet anchor, observing without interjecting. The room felt smaller now, the walls lined with faded charts of historic naval engagements pressing in like silent judges. "Cadets," Thorne began, his gaze sweeping them like a searchlight. "Today's evolution exposed a breach, not in tactics, but in conduct. Riley, explain the transmission." Riley stepped forward, his voice steady but edged with deference. "Sir, it was a misfire. Heat of the sim, sir. No intent to disrupt." His eyes flicked to Kira briefly, then away, the apology unspoken but etched in the furrow of his brow. Hale interjected before Thorne could respond, his tone firm. "Permission to speak, sir? The fault's mine. I carried yesterday's exchange into the briefing. Riley followed my lead. Loyalty bound them, a cadet's code forged in shared bunks and drills, but it dragged the private jest into public light, witnesses multiplying in the form of the duty log, and now this tribunal." Thorne's expression hardened, the lines around his mouth deepening. "Exchange? Sergeant Voss's SAS embedded, not exchange fodder. This island runs on respect, cadets, up and down the chain. Words like that? They undermine it." He gestured to Kira, including her without yielding command. "Your sergeant here has seen real breaches, in compounds where banter costs lives. Learn from that." The room fell silent, save for the distant toll of a buoy bell across the harbor. Kira met the cadets' gazes, her own steady, conveying no recrimination, only the quiet imperative of experience. In her world, redemption came through action, not words. Here, the institution demanded the reckoning be formal, a lesson etched into records. Cadet Voss shifted, breaking the hush. "Sir, We didn't know her full posting at the dock. Green mistake, sir. Won't repeat. It was earnest, the group's collective shield cracking under scrutiny. Thorne paused, weighing the plea against protocol. Mistakes are tuition, cadet, but unpaid, they compound. Extra duties, full kit inspection for the intake, supervised by Petty Officer Langford, and a written reflection on loyalty's cost. Dismissed. The cadets saluted sharply, filing out with footsteps that echoed heavier than before, the door clicking shut behind them like a chambered round. Alone with Thorne, Kira exhaled slowly, the tea cooling untouched. Sir, that reflection, it'll stick if they own it. Thorne nodded, rubbing his chin. Aye, but it's the ripple. Word spreads, other intakes watch. Your insights could shape the next sim. Focus on unit trust. It was an opening, her expertise pulling her deeper into the reform, but the moral test lingered. Had the public call-out mended the fracture, or merely plastered it? Outside, twilight deepened, the island's lights flickering on like wary sentinels, casting pools of yellow across the paths where cadets now scrubbed gear in penance. In the armory that night, the air thick with the tang of solvent and leather, Hale worked beside Riley, their brushes rasping in sync against rifle stocks. Told you it was SAS, Hale muttered, voice low under Langford's distant patrol. Riley nodded, scrubbing harder. Felt like a right idiot on the square, everyone heard. Voss joined them, hauling a crate of cleaning rods. Thorne's fare, though, reflectional sortus. The labour grounded them, the repetitive motion a discipline that mirrored the internal churn. Bravado yielding to accountability, loyalty tested not in jest, but in quiet amends. Kira, in her quarters, reviewed the day's footage on a battered laptop, the screen's glow illuminating the sparse room. Cot, desk, a single photo of her squadron pinned to the wall. The radio clip played back, Riley's voice a stark anomaly amid procedural chatter. She paused it, considering the chain's response, swift but surface. True reform demanded more, embedding conscience into drills, where words weighed as much as weapons. The Solent's night breeze whispered through the vent, carrying the salt of consequence, as Whale Island settled into watchful repose. The defiance sparked by a mistaken label had gone public, its echoes promising transformation or deeper divides in the rigid dance of ranks. The first light of dawn filtered through the narrow slits of the simulation block's windows, casting elongated shadows across the concrete floor, strewn with spent shell casings from the previous day's dry fire exercises. Sergeant Kira Voss arrived early, her boots echoing softly in the empty space as she adjusted the mock barriers, stacked pallets wrapped in weathered tarpaulin to mimic harbour crates. The air held the residual chill of night, laced with the faint ozone tang from the electronic target systems humming to life. Her assignment had evolved overnight. Thorne's directive in the wardroom had pulled her from pure observation into active instruction, a subtle shift that tested her role as outsider. No longer just embedding tactics, she was now tasked with weaving unit cohesion into the curriculum, a quiet reform sparked by the cadets' laps where conscience met command. By 0600 hours, the cadets assembled outside, their breaths visible in the crisp air as they stamped feet against the gravel to ward off the damp. Hale led the front rank, his uniform pressed with extra care, the extra duties from the night before etching faint shadows under his eyes. Riley stood beside him, posture impeccable but gaze averted, while Cadet Voss flanked the group, his usual banter silenced by the weight of shared penance. Thorne's whistle cut the morning fog, and the formation snapped to attention, the collective exhale a disciplined hush. Sergeant Voss will lead today's evolution, Thorne announced from the sidelines, his voice carrying the authority of finality. Focus, threat assessment in contested environments, no deviations, eyes on her. Kira stepped forward, clipboard in hand, her presence commanding without flourish. The cadets' eyes followed her, some with lingering unease, others with newfound wariness. In a breach, she began, her tone even and procedural. You don't just clear rooms. You read the human element, posture, intent, alliance. Today we simulate a harbour incursion, identify friendlies amid unknowns, pair off, rotate roles, report anomalies via radio, precise and professional. She demonstrated a basic sweep, her movements fluid yet restrained, the training rifle an extension of her arm rather than a prop. The cadets nodded, breaking into teams with the scrape of boots and low murmurs of confirmation. Hale paired with a quieter cadet from the rear ranks, leaving Riley and Voss to navigate the barriers together. The simulation ignited with a starter klaxon, smoke pots belching haze that blurred the lines between ally and adversary, marked by colored armbands in the dim light. Hale advanced low, calling, "Clear, right flank," his voice steady, stripped of yesterday's bravado. But as he rounded a corner, he spotted Kira circulating, adjusting a team's positioning with a subtle hand gesture. The memory of the dock and the square flashed, her unflinching gaze amid the chaos, and his radio hand hesitated, thumb hovering over the transmit button. Across the field, Riley's team faltered on a mock extraction. An unknown figure, Langford in civvy garb, emerged from the smoke, forcing a decision, engage or query. Riley keyed his radio, voice clipped. Unknown at 12, assessing posture, non-hostile. But Voss, covering him, added unbidden, confirm ID, no assumptions. It was a small correction, born of the previous night's reflection, but it rippled through the net, drawing Kira's ear. She paused, nodding imperceptibly from her vantage, the institutional gears turning, punishment yielding to procedure, one transmission at a time. The drill intensified as Thorne injected variables, a sudden flanker alarm from hidden speakers, forcing teams to regroup under simulated fire. Hale's group secured their sector, but in the reposition, Riley's boot caught a pallet edge, sending him stumbling into Kira's path. She steadied him with a firm hand on his elbow, the contact brief and professional. Steady, cadet. Grounds uneven, adapt. Riley straightened, color rising, but met her eyes with a nod. Understood, Sergeant. No repeats. The exchange was witnessed by nearby teams, the haze parting just enough to frame it. Not confrontation, but correction, a subtle modeling of the respect Thorne demanded. Midway through, Thorne called a halt, the klaxon winding down to silence. The cadets knelt in place, rifles grounded, sweat beading despite the chill. He strode the line, gloved hands clasped behind his back. Debrief. Sergeant Voss. Observations? Kira stood amid them, her breath even. Progress in clarity, sir. Radios cleaner, assessments sharper. But intent lingers, read it before you act. Her words skirted the personal without naming it, focusing on the collective. Hale rose first, saluting. Sir, the reflection helped. Words matter in the fog. Thorne's gaze lingered on him, approval flickering in the set of his jaw. Noted, cadet. Carry it forward. As the group dispersed for a brief stand-easy, the sun breached the horizon, warming the paths and evaporating the dew. Hale lingered near the barriers, wiping his brow with a sleeve, while Riley approached Kira under the guise of querying a tactic. Sergeant, on the unknown, how do you clock alliance so quick? It was genuine, the first unguarded question since the dock, his posture open rather than defensive. Kira demonstrated a subtle scan, eyes, hands, stance, her voice low. Experience, cadet, but trust starts with your own chain, no room for shadows. Riley absorbed it, nodding slowly, the moral tension easing in the shared ground of instruction. In the instructor's hut afterward, over maps and lukewarm coffee, Thorne confided to Kira and Langford. That was smoother than yesterday. Your lead's integrating. Cadets are listening. Langford grunted agreement, stirring his mug. Hale's stepping up. Shielded his mate last night, but today's on point. Kira sipped her coffee, the bitter steam grounding her thoughts. The public reckoning on the square had pivoted the unit, not shattered it, but reforged it, her defiance in restraint, sparking quiet reform. Yet the test deepened. As embedded instructor, her conscience now bound her to their growth, ripples extending to the joint ops ahead. By midday, the intake rotated to water rations and kit maintenance, the armory's benches filled with the rhythmic clack of cleaning rods. Voss, the cadet, sat with Hale and Riley, their reflections from the night before passed hand to hand like classified briefs. Wrote about the dock, Riley admitted, voice hushed. How one word pulls the line taut. Felt real. Hale nodded, oiling his rifle bolt. She's SAS for a reason. Teaches without the boot. The camaraderie rebuilt, tempered by accountability, loyalty shifting from jest to genuine bond. Kira observed from the doorway, the scent of solvent sharp in her nostrils, before heading to the wardroom for Thorne's update. The island's paths bustled with purposeful strides, the Solent's breeze carrying the distant call of a ferry horn. The fracture from a mistaken label was mending, but legacy loomed. Her actions, once defiant in silence, now wove into the institution's fabric, a testament to moral strength amid rigid orders. As the sun climbed, casting crisp shadows over the parade square, Whale Island breathed with renewed discipline, the quiet transformation unfolding one precise step at a time. The midday sun hung high over Whale Island, its rays slicing through the thin veil of clouds to bake the parade square into a shimmering expanse of heat haze. The asphalt radiated warmth upward, turning the air thick and insistent, carrying the mingled scents of sun-warmed tar, distant diesel from patrol boats, and the faint earthy residue of morning drills. Cadets moved in measured columns toward the simulation annex, their boots thudding in unison against the ground, a cadence that spoke of restored order after the previous day's upheavals. Lieutenant Commander Thorne walked at the rear, his peaked cap casting a sharp shadow, while Sergeant Kira Voss led the front, her stride purposeful, clipboard tucked under one arm like a sidearm. The annex loomed ahead, a squat concrete bunker reinforced with blast doors from its Cold War origins, now repurposed for joint service scenarios. Kira's expanded role had taken root overnight, Thorne's directive evolving her from observer to co-lead on the upcoming joint ops prep. A 2-day immersion blending naval cadets with army attachments from Portsmouth garrison. The moral tension from the dock incident and radio blunder had not faded. It had crystallized into this, a test of institutional adaptability where her conscience demanded she push the unit beyond surface corrections toward unbreakable cohesion. "Form up inside," she called, her voice cutting clean through the hum of an idling generator. The cadets complied without hesitation, Hale's eyes meeting hers briefly in silent acknowledgement, Riley's posture straighter than before. Inside, the annex's cool dimness enveloped them, fluorescent strips buzzing to life overhead, illuminating rows of modular walls that could reconfigure into urban sprawls or shipboard compartments. The air hummed with the low whine of projectors warming up, and the faint metallic tang of oiled hydraulics lingered from the previous setup. Thorne addressed the group from a raised platform, his gloved hands clasped behind his back. "This evolution integrates Army protocols, counterinsurgency in a harbor setting. Sergeant Voss will oversee the naval elements. Captain Ellis from the garrison handles ground. No silos. One breach in trust, and the whole op fails." His gaze swept the ranks, lingering on Hale, Riley and Voss, the trio now symbols of the unit's recent trial by fire. Captain Ellis, a wiry army officer in his mid-40s, with a faint scar tracing his jaw from a Falklands tour, nodded from the side. His team, 6 soldiers in mixed camouflage, filed in, their presence injecting a new dynamic, cross-service friction, where naval precision met army grit. Kira exchanged a professional salute with Ellis, their brief eye contact conveying mutual respect, forged in shared briefings. The simulation kicked off with a briefing holoprojection, a virtual Portsmouth dock under simulated threat, red icons pulsing for hostiles amid blue for friendlies. "Assess and extract," Kira instructed, dividing the cadets into mixed teams, Hale with an Army Lance Corporal, Riley shadowing Ellis, Voss paired with a naval petty officer. "Read every signal, posture, call signs, intent, radios only for confirms." The teams dispersed into the maze of barriers, the clatter of gear and low voices echoing off the walls. Kira circulated, her boots silent on the padded flooring, observing as the scenario unfolded. Smoke machines hissed to life, filling corridors with grey wisps that mimicked fog off the Solent, while speakers crackled with fabricated radio chatter, urgent, overlapping, testing resolve. Hale's team hit their first node, a contested junction, where an actor in neutral garb hesitated, forcing a query. "Alliance check. State position," Hale transmitted. Voice steady. drawing from the reflections that had kept him up the night before. The Lance Corporal nodded approval, their synced advance a small victory in cross-branch trust. Riley's group encountered turbulence early. Ellis's soldier triggered a flanker alert, and in the haze Riley keyed his radio instinctively. Unknown at 9, posture defensive, but confirm. No jest slipped through. The words were procedural, honed by the wardroom's weight. Ellis paused the play, turning to him. Good call, Cadet. Assumptions kill in joint ops. Kira, overhearing from an adjacent wall, felt the shift. A ripple of reform, her silent defiance in the tribunal now echoing in their precision. But the test deepened when Voss's team reached the extraction point. A mock VIP cornered by hostiles, with Kira embedded as an unseen evaluator, her silhouette blending into the shadows. Voss advanced low, rifle sweeping, but spotted her first, the subtle tension in her stance, a deliberate ambiguity to probe their judgment. Sergeant Voss confirmed, "Friendly asset," he radioed. No hesitation, pulling his petty officer partner into cover. The call cleared the node, but as they regrouped, Hale's voice cut over the net from across the annex. All sectors secure, no shadows. It was a collective affirm, the cadets' earlier fractures mending under the pressure of joint eyes. Thorne monitored from the control booth, his radio crackling with notes to Ellis. Naval sides integrating clean. The evolution peaked with a full breach simulation. Teams converging on a central command post, alarms blaring as lights flickered to simulate blackout. In the chaos, Riley stumbled on a loose panel, echoing his earlier mishap, but Hale covered seamlessly, hauling him up with a gloved hand. "On me, adapt." No words wasted, just action, loyalty manifest in motion. Kira emerged from cover to debrief the extraction, her face streaked with simulated grime. "Solid. You read the room, human and otherwise, that's the chain holding." The teams knelt, breaths ragged, as Thorne and Ellis called time, the smoke dissipating to reveal nods of approval rippling through the ranks. Post-drill in the annex's ready room, the groups mingled over water bottles and protein bars, the air cooling as fans whirred overhead. Thorne pulled Kira aside near a tactical board pinned with Solent charts. "Your lead's bridging the gap, Sergeant. Cadets are owning it. Hale's report this morning flagged the dock as a pivot point." She nodded, the board's pins glinting like metal edges. "Reform sticks when it's earned, sir. Joint ops will test it further." Ellis joined them, clapping her shoulder lightly. SAS touch keeps everyone sharp. No room for old habits. The exchange was brief, professional, but it underscored the legacy. One act of mistaken defiance had sparked this, pulling the institution toward quieter strengths. As the sun dipped toward evening, casting orange hues through the annex slits, the cadets filed out, gear slung over shoulders. Hale paused by the door, saluting Kira crisply. "Learn from the fog, Sergeant. Won't forget." Riley and Voss echoed with nods, their camaraderie tempered, no longer frayed by unchecked words. In the officers' mess later, over stew and the day's logs, Thorne raised a mug. "To the unit, stronger for the strain." Kira sipped in silence, the salt of the stew grounding her, as the Solent's evening breeze whispered through open vents. The public reckoning had yielded redemption, her conscience woven into the ranks' fabric, but the final joint evolution loomed, a true measure of transformation amid the rigid pull of duty. Outside, the island's paths glowed under sodium lamps, cadets dispersing to barracks with purposeful strides. The fracture from a harbor jest was nearly sealed, loyalty reborn in drills and silences. Yet Kira knew the cost, integrity's quiet toll, rippling through careers like tides against the revetments. Whale Island stood sentinel in the twilight, its discipline unbroken, the moral arc bending toward enduring honor. If this story already has your respect, hit the like button. It helps the story of Sergeant Kira Voss reach those who still believe in honor. The twilight deepened over Whale Island, the Solent surface a rippling mirror of indigo under the fading glow of sodium lamps along the revetments. A stiff breeze carried the sharp tang of salt and low-tide mud from the harbor, rustling the salt grass that fringed the paths leading to the simulation annex. Inside the ready room, the air hung heavy with the residue of the day's exertions. Sweat-soaked webbing draped over benches, the faint metallic bite of discharged training rounds lingering like an afterthought. Sergeant Kira Voss stood at the tactical board, her fingers tracing the final layout for the culminating joint evolution, a full-spectrum harbour defence scenario, blending naval cadets with the Army detachment in a test of seamless integration. Her reflection in the glass overlay stared back, eyes steady, lines of fatigue etched but unyielding, a testament to the quiet grind that had pulled her from observer to architect of reform. Lieutenant Commander Thorne entered with Captain Ellis, their boots echoing softly on the linoleum, clipboards tucked under arms like extensions of command. "Sergeant," Thorne said, his voice a low rumble, "logs from this morning's prep. Cadets are synced. Hale's team ran the breach twice clean." Ellis nodded, his scar catching the overhead light. "Army side reports the same, no silos forming. Your cohesion module's taking hold." Kira turned, saluting crisply. "It's theirs now, sirs. The chain's only as strong as the weakest link they forge." The words were procedural, but beneath them pulsed the moral arc. The dockside jest and radio blunder, once fractures, now catalysts for a unit tempered by accountability. Thorne's gaze held hers a beat longer, approval unspoken, the institution's gears meshing under her influence. By 2200 hours, the island settled into the hush of night routines, barracks lights winking out one by one as the Reveille clock ticked toward dawn. In the cadets' quarters, Hale lay on his bunk, the thin mattress creaking under his weight, staring at the exposed beams overhead. The reflection he'd submitted that afternoon, pages of neat script on Loyalty's Edge, lay folded on his locker, a weight lifted but not forgotten. Riley bunked across from him, polishing his boots with rhythmic strokes, the leather gleaming under the desk lamp. "Tomorrow's the real test," Riley murmured, voice pitched low against the snores of the intake. "Joint op, no room for slips." Hale nodded into the shadows. "We got it. Sergeant showed us how." Cadet Voss, from the upper bunk, added softly, "From lost to locked in. That's the lesson." Their words wove a quiet bond, the trio's earlier bravado recast as resolve, loyalty no longer jest, but the steel binding ranks. Dawn broke with a clarity that belied the night's chill, the sun cresting the mainland horizon to paint the parade square in pale gold. The Reveille bugle pierced the air at 500, pulling the combined force, naval cadets and army soldiers, into formation with the scrape of boots and the rustle of gear. The scent of fresh brewed tea wafted from the galley, mingling with the brine as teams mustered at the annex. Kira stood at the fore, her battle dress crisp, training rifle slung across her chest. Thorne and Ellis flanked her, the weight of oversight shared. "This is live sim," Thorne announced, his command carrying over the assembled ranks. "Harbour incursion. Detect, contain, extract. Cross-branch teams. Trust the call signs. Sergeant Voss coordinates the corps." The cadets snapped to, Hale's eyes locking briefly with hers, a nod of deference earned through the fire of reckonings past. The evolution ignited with a thunderous klaxon, doors grinding open to reveal the annex's heart, a sprawling mock dockyard, barriers reconfigured into labyrinthine paths lined with holographic projectors casting flickering shadows of hostile vessels on the walls. Smoke billowed from vents, thick and choking, simulating fog off the Solent, while speakers crackled with layered radio traffic, urgent pips and position calls testing ears amid the din. Hale's mixed team plunged in first, advancing low through a simulated gangway, the Army Lance Corporal at his 6. "Clear left, posture neutral ahead," Hale transmitted, voice steady over the net, his sweep precise, drawing from Kira's drilled scans. The Lance Corporal confirmed, their rhythm unbroken, a bridge forged where doubt once lingered. Riley's group hit resistance at a choke point, actors in shadowed alcoves forcing split-second alliances, armbands obscured by haze. "Query unknown. State intent," Riley called, rifle trained but finger off the trigger, echoing the restraint Kira had modeled. Ellis's soldier covered him, the pair converging without friction. From the control booth, Thorne monitored the feeds, his radio linking to Kira on the floor. Flawless integration so far, cadets owning the human read. Kira keyed back, weaving through the barriers herself as embedded evaluator, her boots silent on the grated flooring. "Affirm, sir, no echoes of yesterday." Voss's team extracted a mock asset from a compromised warehouse node, his radio crisp. "Friendly confirmed. Voss clear." The call rippled outward, sinking the flanks, the unit's pulse steady under pressure. The climax surged as alarms peaked, a full breach cascading through the sim, lights strobing to mimic explosions, forcing all teams to converge on the central command post. In the chaos, Hale's rifle snagged on a barrier, yanking him off balance into smoke-choked dark. Riley, rotating nearby, extended a hand without breaking stride. "Online, adapt." Hale clasped it, pulling up, their eyes meeting in the flash of a projector. Trust manifest. No words needed. Kira emerged from cover to oversee the rally, her silhouette cutting the haze like a beacon. "Regroup, report sectors." The responses flooded the net, clean and choral, the fracture from the dock now a distant scar, healed by discipline's quiet forge. Thorne called time as the klaxon wound down, the annex falling silent save for ragged breaths and the whir of cooling fans. Teams knelt in debrief circles, water bottles passed hand to hand, the acrid smoke dissipating to reveal faces streaked with grime, but alight with accomplishment. Ellis addressed the group first, his voice gravelly. "Joint strength. Nailed it. No weak links." Thorne followed, nodding to Kira. Sergeant Voss's lead turned green to gold. "Cadets, your growth shows." Hale stood, saluting the line. "Credit to the chain, sirs, and the lessons." Applause rippled, restrained, professional, but it sealed the transformation. Kira, once mislabeled outsider, now symbol of moral steel. Her defiance in composure sparking institutional shift. In the wardroom that evening, as the sun dipped into the Solent, Thorne raised a mug to the officers and key cadets invited for the closeout. To Whale Island, stronger, sharper. Kira sat among them, the steam from her tea curling like harbour mist, her thoughts on the ripples. Hale's promotion nod in the logs. Riley's request for advanced tactics under her. The intake's cohesion report flagged for broader Navy rollout. The system had learned, not through spectacle, but through the cost of integrity, her conscience woven into its core. Outside, the island's lights flickered against the gathering dusk, a bastion of quiet reform. As the group dispersed, Kira lingered on the path to her quarters, the gravel crunching underfoot, the sea's murmur a constant underscore. One mistaken word had tested them all, but in the rigid dance of ranks, it had bent toward enduring honor, loyalty's legacy etched in every precise step. Subscribe for more stories of loyalty, courage, and justice within the ranks. Thank you for watching the case of Sergeant Kira Voss. See you in the next one.